When it comes to challenging communications at work, if you're working in a cross-cultural environment, if you're using not your first language at work, communicating with your boss, with your colleague, with your subordinates or your clients, how do you overcome the language and cultural barrier for more effective communication? 3 tips on how to do that today. Hi everyone, Jade from Career Journey Professional, helping you to find and land in that career that suits who you are, utilize your strengths, and getting you closer to the career goal. Today, it's a topic that will come up a lot with my clients because most of my clients are working, I would call them transnational career seekers, are people who are working probably not in your mother tongue or not working in a culture that you were born in, migrants or immigrants or formerly students or now working in a different culture, and country. Before we get started, I want to distinguish 2 of the barriers and then break it down into different parts. So when we talk about that actual barrier, what does it entail? The first part is obviously language. However, when I work with people who are not using their first language to work, there are actually 2 layers of it. The first layer is your actual language ability, using that foreign language, which is your vocabulary, your expressions. Can you really express yourself? Or even just expressing one sentence, you don't know how to express that. That's the first layer of it. And this part, it's something you're going to take time to really pick it up, to learn it, to find your expression using another language. In another country, right? And the second part is actual communication about work itself. It's just delivering, explaining, discussing, or negotiating, debating the actual details about work, or explaining what's about work, right? So this part of the communication is where we can improve, I guess, in a relatively short period of time when you put more structure to it, when you have a strategy to it, when you really put effort into improving that. That's what we want to distinguish in terms of language itself. And secondly, when we talk about culture, there are different parts of culture. We talk about culture as, for example, if you come into Australia, we talk about Australian culture. What is Australian culture? It's the culture more like a nation, the generalized idea of what this country is more like. People are more laid back, they love the beaches, they like to spend time with their family, weekend on the beaches, stuff like that. And they are what we call Australian work culture, which is quite different from other parts of the world, right? It has its own unique characters. Like Australian people are a bit laid back, but they're still punctual and professional. Australian people like to socialize and go to drinks after work, stuff like that. And also there are specific cultures of your own company or that specific team that you work in, which is more important when it comes to the tips that we're gonna share. All right, let's get started. It's very important to recognize that and see there are these distinguished differences between your actual language ability and the way that you can use language at work, or the different culture. When we talk about culture, what specific culture we're talking about. All right, so the first tip, number 1, on improving effective communication in a cross-cultural environment. Let's start from work itself. So at work, know your boss. Know what your managers or your team or your people in the next level, what are they really wanting, and also the way they like to communicate. What are they really wanting? It's pretty much straightforward, I guess. Of all managers in the world, they want the same thing. They want the team target or whatever services or products to be delivered at the right time, in the right way, with good quality. It's pretty straightforward. And if you can try to think about things or try to organize your work, communicate in a way that thinking about what your managers would prefer, that will be the best and it helps you to communicate in that way. A second one is what I mentioned in another video on office politics, how to survive office politics. Do have a look of it if you haven't watched it before, which helps you to better understand this as well. Even there are 10 Australian managers, 10 of them are going to have different style to work, different preferences to communicate, different ways of approaching people, right? So the most important thing it's not just understand the culture of the company, but also understand how your manager works. What's his preferred style? Some of them might be quite direct, some of them might be straightforward. The others can be, they like to have brainstorm, they like to bounce ideas off with you. But in the end, they are the one who to make decision. They just want to have that discussion, or they just want to have more ideas so they can make that decision. But they're also, generally we would say female managers, they do care about details. They do care about how it's planned out and how the process goes, stuff like that. Do pay attention to your manager. What do they prefer? What's the best way to work with them? And do observe people who work really well with them. What's the dynamics like? What's the best way to approach them? That itself, it's already valuable to improve your communication, regardless your language skill is good or bad. That's part of the tip 1. Second part of the tip number 1, it's just verbally clarify with your manager what's their expectations. It's so important for you to understand. Just sit down and clarify with your manager your work jurisdictions, what tasks should be delivered, in what way, by what time, and how do they prefer to communicate. I do have seen this at work, that a lot of the Western managers, they prefer straightforward communication, whereas Asian people are a bit modest. They have difficulty to say no. They have difficulties to point out differences or point out mistakes if it's people who are more superior in the organization. So do clarify that expectation and how they prefer to communicate. It's gonna massively help you. You're just asking them how they want to be treated, and treat them in the way they want, right? Okay, and tip number 2, let's talk about communication, which is the language itself, which the language barrier may come to play a part. What I realized very, very important to break the barrier in terms of language, which I mentioned, is having a more strategic approach. Look at how your team organizes things, how the communication goes. Maybe it's a weekly update report, email. Just model and follow what other people are doing at first if you're not sure. And since you clarify the expectation from your manager, would help you to better communicate anyways. And if for your own vocabulary, if it's not your first language, supposedly you're improving that over time anyways, right? You should be learning, you should be improving on a daily basis. So eventually that will come up to your expected level. Another thing, a little tip that I would think would be a great point to break the ice is communication outside of work. Communication with your boss, with your team, with people in the next manager level in your company. Not talking about work. It's where the actual personal bond comes from. It's where that real connection comes from. Treat them equally, because most of the managers treat you equal as well. They treat you equal with respect, even you're their subordinates. You can do the same. A great way is to imagine they are your distant friend. Some friend you haven't catch up, or you're not very close to, but if they are your friend, what would you do? You would truly care about them, care about their life, how they're going, how they're feeling, what do they like, what are their hobbies. Maybe they like skiing, maybe they like fishing, maybe they're just going through, they're having a newly born baby, they're learning how to be a mother or father. Everyone has challenges, everyone is experiencing different parts of life. And if you can find common ground with them in that area, which is great. But if you cannot, even just being a good listener, genuinely care, it's the way that you can build a stronger connection. So the communication outside of work, not about work, whether you are going to functions, industry events, if you're just going to after work drinks, if you're going to, some team building expeditions, or even just chit chat in the kitchen, you bump into your manager, or downstairs in the cafe and you have some small talk. That's where you can build real connection, find the common ground. If you cannot, be a good listener. So that's the communication itself. And thirdly, cultural side of things. So it's very obvious if people are from different culture, the cultural differences will be quite big. So it's always helpful to keep an open mind. What I said previously, whether it's people working in Asia or Asian people working in Western culture, they either kind of give up, just ended up with that conclusion that we're just different, I just don't understand, or it's just not going to work for me, or they just decided to dislike the other culture. The best way, I suppose, is be curious. Try to understand. It's not saying that you have to become part of their culture, but try to understand where they're coming from, and try to learn why they're behaving in such ways. What's the best way to respect them in that way? Even among differences of cultures, if you can find common things, that'll be great. That's again where you can feel like you're not that different, feel like you are connected, feel like you do understand each other. Once there were so many things that I have seen, like my previous colleague, like I see a lot of Italian people are very family oriented, which is same as a lot of Asian cultures. There are so many similarities, and they're like French, Spanish people. They love food. Similar to, again, a lot of Asian countries. And there are a lot of other cultures who just loves alcohol. And again, that again is similar to a lot of Asian cultures again. So finding that, to keep an open mind, be curious, learn, and then finding that common ground. It's very easy for you to bond in that way, and to survive and better collaborate and to complement each other in that way as well. Those are the 3 tips I find can be, it's practical and useful. If you are in a culture that's different from your own, and you're speaking a language and working in a language that's different from your own, it takes effort, it's not easy, but those are the tips that it can actually help you. If you do have such difficulties, when it comes to, I guess, the more difficult side of communication at work, could it be negotiating, could it be really you're working with someone you don't like, but you don't want to enhance that relationship, to reach out to me. Otherwise, join our Facebook group, there are more lives there, or maybe join our WeChat group if you wish, and I will see you next video.